All right. So, hi, folks. My name is Julia. I am a member of Baltimore Racial Justice Action, and I want to thank you all for coming to our 13th of the month. This is our April 13th of the month, and we are talking about when representation is not enough. Go to the next slide. And I am going to invite you with our time together today to make sure you have a beverage or a snack, having your laptop charger close by, some pen and paper. We will be journaling in the beginning, and then setting aside anything that might actually distract you from our discussion today. I'm going to take it over to Michelle, who's going to go over our social media information.
Thank you, Julia. Welcome, everyone. So if you would like to follow us on social media, we have Instagram, a Twitter, Facebook, and a YouTube. If you want to take a few seconds now and go ahead and follow us for updates about our 13th of the month events and other programming that we'll be having, you can go ahead and do that now. We appreciate, any followers we get and being able to extend our community on social media. About us, Baltimore Racial Justice Action is a network of Maryland individuals committed to social transformation with an emphasis on racial equity. BRJA was officially founded in 2003, but had its roots in the Agents of Change workshops that began in 1996. BRJA is a program of Fusion Partnerships, a nonprofit organization. BRJA offers workshop series for members of the public, consultation for organizations, and free monthly dialogue events on the intersection of race and other societal issues. And we do those on every 13th of the month. To learn more about our public workshops, consultation, or 13th of the month events, visit us at bemoreantiracist.org. Once again, we are a nonprofit and we appreciate anything that our community gives to us so we can continue this work. If you would like to donate, please visit us at bemoreantiracist.org/donate. And if you would like to sign up to be a sustainer, that is also an option. And this allows us to do these events every 13th of the month and all of our other programs. And now I will turn it back over to Julia.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So welcome to When Representation is Not Enough. This is, as I mentioned, this is our April event. You can go to the next slide, Dana. And I wanted to kind of go over an agenda really quickly. So we did the BRJA welcome. We're going to be leading that up with a journal activity, and then kind of going into a little bit like why we're discussing this topic. We're going to have a panel discussion, some action steps, and hopefully we'll have some questions or comments from the audience. And we are welcoming your thoughts during our time together today. So for that journaling, I want you to take some time and think about a time when you're either watching TV, you saw something in the newspaper, saw in a magazine. Think of a time you saw yourself represented. This can be for multiple reasons. This can be about race. This can be about, gender equity or sexuality. This can be about your size. This can be anything. But who did you see? Who would you see that represented you, and how did it make you feel? So we're going to give about like 5 or 6 minutes for you to kind of sit and talk about that. I'm going to ask our panelists to also think about that question so we can kind of share our answers, and then we'll start talking about this lovely topic. Okay. So to our panelists who you thought of a time that you saw yourself represented, who was it and how did that make you feel? I can go first, since I'm the one that prompted this question. I chose two people. Two of them, the two people that I chose are Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott. I still do technically, but those two, like I would never forget like seeing Queen Latifah and watching her on like Living Single. And she was like, she was a brown skinned like woman. She was Black, she was, bigger, and she was like living her life and just doing what she wanted to do. And to me, that looked like freedom, like that looked amazing. And then with Missy Elliott, the same thing. There was like this big dark skinned girl, and my mom like loved Missy Elliott. I think because she knew like me being like a fat Black girl growing up, she was like, she's creative. And so like I really started to see Missy Elliott as like just she's everything. She's an amazing performer and artist. And so those were two people that I saw growing up that really had an impact. And I felt represented. I felt like if they can be in the room, I could be in the room. If they could like work at these places, I could work at those places. And so it really made me feel like the world was a lot more open to me, because I saw them on my TV screens or I heard them on the radio. How about anybody else?
I can go next. I would say when I was thinking about this prompt, I was thinking about when Girlfriends first came on TV. And I just remember being like over the top excited about it. I think for me, it was a difference in like seeing Black people on family dramas like Family Matters and The Cosby and things like that. And this felt like a really welcome departure from that. And seeing, women who are a little older than myself, who are professionals and, talking the way that me and my friends talk to each other, having similar issues. I just remember being so excited and feeling like, why was this not done before now? Why is this the first time I'm seeing this kind of representation? Feeling like, why did it take so long, but also feeling really excited about it.
Yes, I feel you. Adore Anthony.
So for me, this is a really complex question. Let me tell you why. Because even though there were shows that outwardly were representative, right? That showed Black people, the way in which those people showed up, it was very clear that their characters were written by white people. So if we're talking just about the visual representation, then, I can talk about, Girlfriends, even Star Trek with Lieutenant Uhuru, shows like that. But it was so clear that they were written by white people. So for the question in terms of real representation, where I felt like these were real people who were talking about the same things that the people in my family were talking about, the same struggles, right? I have to go back to, Fannie Lou Hamer, to, Martin Luther King, to Malcolm X, to those civil rights icons, who were just speaking from the struggles that I would hear my parents, aunts, uncles talking about.
Ooh, I like that. Anthony.
So representation, I put down my brother, these are all childhood. My Brother and Me, I don't know if folks remember that.
Yes.
Gullah Gullah Island. And so these were both shows that were on like Nick Jr. that were like very basics in teaching about sharing, colors, numbers, and things like that, right? And so it was like, okay, literally represented there are Black people on the television show. And then a little bit older, Smart Guy, and I'm saying it like this because these are all shows where there were Black people there, but it was for a good amount of time that we're not actually talking or getting to know these characters. And while it was part of the time where it's like each episode, it's almost like it starts over, like nothing even happened before. And each episode is like a new day.
Episodic, yeah.
There was no depth there.
Mhm.
And then I can't help but, of course, name the representation is on the 5 o'clock news and seeing Black people committing crimes on the 5 o'clock news. And that being the only representation and not really positive. But just always hearing family members being like, the only time we're on the news is if they have something negative to say about us. Like Black people are the only ones that commit crime in this country. So.
Cool. Yeah, I asked this question because I'm hoping it gets you into a headspace of remembering. I think I'm not sure where people were in their own like kind of personal journey regarding like anti-oppression and anti-racism, but like I remember feeling like that was enough. Like when I was younger, like, oh, okay, well, we're here, like we're in these spaces, like these places, we're in magazines, we have our TV shows, and so for a really long time, like that felt like enough. And I think that when like I kind of started doing my own work, I was like, wait, that isn't enough and I want more. And what exactly I wanted more of is kind of the question. So that kind of gets us to the next slide, which is why are we talking about representation? So this topic, I feel like has been around for a minute now. I feel like I've heard a lot of people from very different generations and backgrounds talking about the limits of representation, why representation is not enough. It's not enough just to have the TV shows and the magazines. It's not enough to have people in certain positions of power, but we need more for our community and for this country in order to truly move the needle. And so I think that what we're seeing, I think especially around the pandemic, a lot more discussions about, hey, I love this show and it's great and I'm really excited for it. But how does this actually impact our community? Or, hey, I'm really glad that this person got this job and like we have pictures of them and that's really exciting. But how is this person actually going to impact? How are they going to use that power or their position to impact us positively as a community? So those types of questions, those types of thoughts really kind of opened up. Why is representation like not enough? Why is it just a small piece of a much larger puzzle and a part of a larger structure that we don't always name? Anthony, I know that you were kind of doing like a poll. Can you share your,
Yeah, so I'll plug for, if you're not already following us on IG, follow us on our IG at Be More Anti-Racist. But we did a poll yesterday, counting down to today's event. And 100% of folks said yes when we asked the question, does representation still matter in 2022? So 100% of folks said yes to that.
Yeah, and that is something. I think that it's a really important thing to kind of question. I think that representation is so important. I do think it's important, but let's kind of get into like what we mean by representation. So we have some examples of some stuff. We're gonna have some conversations on these pictures. I'm sure some people are actually pretty familiar. The first picture is pretty recent. As you all know, we have, of course, like for the last week or so at this point, Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed, is going to be confirmed as our next Supreme Court Justice. She will be the first Black woman to actually be on the Supreme Court. That is really, really awesome. But it kind of brought me to the conversation of Clarence Thomas. I remember not too much, but I do remember with Clarence Thomas, the Anita Hill situation, a lot of people were so excited about like, oh, we have a Black person on the Supreme Court. He's gonna, this is really good for us as a community, as a people. And, obviously when that happened, I was not of the same age and I had the same knowledge that I have now, but I remember with the whole Anita Hill like situation, there was like, why is she doing this? This is going to make it so much harder for us. Like, this is going to make it so much harder for us to move up. She's, you know, she's setting us back. Why would she do this to this Black man? I can't, this is our first one. We can't do that to him. And then only to get older and to recognize that Clarence Thomas is like, even his viewpoint and interpretation is not for any of us. Like, he's not for me. Like, and so it's okay to have representation. It's great, I guess, for him that he's on the Supreme Court, but his actual work, like what he actually represents, the work that he does, the ideas and the ideals that he pushes, those things aren't in line, at least from my point of view, for the majority of the people that I like call family and friends. Like, he does not benefit a lot of the communities that I work in. If anything, is very harmful towards the communities that I work in. So I feel like that's a really good example of what we mean about representation. Like, it's not enough to have him on the Supreme Court or to have her on the Supreme Court. I wanted to hear other people's thoughts about this.
I was thinking about this too in a different way. We talked about this before in like the planning. This is a really good example of folks operating out of scarcity, right? And that part of this is like, sometimes we as Black folks being like, oh, this might be our only chance or be the only one, right? And so Clarence Thomas being lifted up that way because Thurgood Marshall was first Supreme Court Justice, and then Clarence Thomas, it was like, we gotta hold that position. It doesn't matter who, doesn't matter if he's fighting for our rights or whatever, we can't give up, we got our one spot and we can't give it up, right? And so there's oftentimes a narrative of this scarcity that we operate from, that it's like, this person is representing us. And even if it's to the detriment or the harm of us, we want to put somebody Black in there, and we don't need to go any further or move the conversation beyond that, as long as we got a Black body in there.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, Anthony. And I also felt like, so I feel like a lot of times as being a Black woman in America, I'm always having two pockets of feelings about things, right? Like, I'm excited because Ketanji looks like me, right? And I want my kids to see her, and I talk to my kids about it, and I want them to feel proud and feeling this historic moment, right? But also, then there's this other pocket of feelings where I feel like, you know, Joe Biden made certain promises to the Black community, like Black people literally put him in office, and you know, we had Black people in certain places in the South standing in line, over 8 hours to vote. The fact that they even had to do that, you know, we know the reasons why that happens, right? But even given the sacrifice that people went through to put him in office, and then he, you know, made all these promises, and then I felt like getting Ketanji confirmed was like a easy, you know, one for like, see, Black people, look what I did for you all, right? Yeah. And at the same time, we are losing voting rights at a historical rate in this country. The Supreme Court is still heavily skewed towards conservatism. So while these things are still happening, and we don't know what's going to happen in the midterms, we don't know what's going to happen in the next election to Black people, not just our voting rights, but all kinds of civil liberties are in jeopardy right now, right? And so it feels like instead of having that bigger, larger conversation, it's like, but look what I did for you all, you know, and this visual of, you know, them being in the Rose Garden and, you know, Kamala being excited. It felt, what's the word I want to use here? It cheapened the whole thing for me, because there's this bigger thing that's happening that on a national level, we're not really talking about.
Right. It feels performative. It feels like, oh, like we're in this Rose Garden, like we've arrived. And I think it's interesting because Ketanji, she used some lines from Maya Angelou's poem about, like, you know, being the dream and the hope of the slave. And it was just kind of like, and it's so, because I was like, I know the Julia of like 10 years ago would have been like, yes, girl, like, do it. And it just like, it rang very hollow to me. I was like, I'm so happy for her. And at the same time, I'm like, oh, like, this is not gonna change anything. Like, unless, and that's what I think is terrifying. It's like, I felt like, oh, like, good Lord, like, this is not enough and I'm done. So I couldn't even like revel. I couldn't even be happy. I was just like, Okay, yeah, Maya Angelou. I know that poem too. Like it was just,
Yeah,
I was over it.
yeah.
So we also have up next.
Wait, Adar didn't go. Adar.
Oh yeah, Dar didn't.
No, I mean, I kind of feel like you all know my views on this whole thing. And I must admit, this irritates me to no end. Because first of all, we expect people who are swearing to uphold the system to somehow get in it and change who they've always been, even before they got there.
Yeah.
And when we do that, then what we are literally saying is the only thing they have to be is Black.
Yeah.
That is what we're saying. Or a wise Latina, or the first Native American woman, right, or man. This is what we're saying. We're saying that only the visual diversity matters. And who does that empower? Who, what does that do? It keeps things the same. And what you said, Michelle, I agree with you like a gazillion %. We don't, you all talk about the long lines that people had to stand in. These lines are going to be longer. People are literally being taken off of voter rolls. There will be people who go to the polls in November, Black and brown, make no mistake, who will get there and find out that they cannot vote.
Yep.
And by that time, on the day of, all of this is too late. It will be too late to do anything that is going to change the reality that they cannot vote. So all of this that's happening now, yesterday I was sharing with some of you that I realized that what had happened for me yesterday was that I got caught up in the distraction and missed the lesson until later in the day. We get caught up in the distraction, all of us do, and we end up missing the lesson until it is too late. And when we're talking about diversity in terms of visual representation, then we are getting caught up in that distraction and in that feel-good moment of a Ketanji Brown Jackson. And we are missing the lesson that is coming down the pike, and that is the lesson that we're going to have to live with.
Yeah.
For years to come.
Thank you so much. That actually, I think it is pretty much the overall kind of like message of this, as well as for our next slide, like with Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. So important to remember, right? I remember, like, y'all, when Barack won, I was at Morgan State, go Bears, and I was on Cold Spring Lane, like shouting and so happy. And then like really after his presidency, just really being like, wait, like I got this mixed up. Like, and furthermore, even now it's hard because it's like, it's once you see the structure for what it is, once you see the setup for what it is, it's hard to kind of go back just to being like, oh, well, it's hard for him. Like, it's so much harder for me to do that. I believe that like with Barack and similarly with Kamala Harris, very, very excited and happy for them. But I have to question like what we're actually kind of like bringing ourselves into. It kind of reminds me, what is it, like with MLK when he talks about to integrating people into a burning house.
Right.
Exactly. So it's like we fought so hard for integration, but integration into what?
Yeah, but can I just make a small shift? We did not fight for integration. That was not the goal. The goal was desegregation, legal desegregation, right? So even when, and where was this like integration? Who pushed the integration myth? We have to look at that because that was not what the fight was about. And so we getting caught up in the distraction rather than the lesson. And we let white America still redefine and reframe even our movements and our moving forward to ways that will make it palatable for them, right? And let me share this example, and then I'll just shut up, I promise. Everybody on the panel knows that before we started, I was taking the U.S. citizenship quiz just to see if I could pass. Now, here's the thing. One of the questions was, which of the following is not a reason colonists came to America? Which of the following is not a reason that colonists came to America? The right answer was that they did not come because there was lots of land to colonize. That's in a citizenship test. This is what we're teaching. This is what we're taught. And so it's like night is day and day is night. You know, we're being taught these lies. Even, you know, you have to answer that this is the right answer if you want to pass the test.
Right.
This is what happens here, even as we look at diversity. We're looking at the visual representation. We're not looking at the puppet master who is pulling the strings.
Absolutely. And so, of course, I think we see this a lot in politics. I know that also before we started, Adar gave us the stat, well, it's only been 11 Black senators in the history of our country. That is, and 8 of them are still alive, right?
Right.
Like,
which shows how recently Black people were even had a chance of being elected. And yet we're going to be told that representation doesn't matter because the policies, federal and state, and even our local policies are fair and objective.
Right.
And talking about representation, that is the distraction. And then we have America, you know, who is going to choose people who are the least objectionable because they are talking not about changing the systems or structures, but they're talking about changing the symbolism.
Right. This is such an important point. And this is of course, that we see this a lot more now in politics. I think for a lot of people seeing Barack Obama become president, and also, I mean, we cannot deny him having a Black family was okay, we are diverse, we are great, it's changing. Because even now we have conservative views as a talking point. You can't say there was racism when we saw Barack Obama and his family in the White House. We have all these people. We have Tim Scott over here. He's if we didn't would we be voting for them? And I think it's important to remember that everything is a setup to try to continue white supremacy. It's the symbolism, the representation. Okay, we have Barack, we have Kamala, we have all these people. And then we see how you treat them. We see how the system treats them, even as they're going through these positions. And then after it's gone, it's well, you can't say that we were racist. I mean, we got them in here. And it's yeah, but you also kind of treated them like crap. It's we don't remember that. It's so the representation ends up ringing hollow because the system itself, it does not matter. It's going to operate the way it's going to operate. And so it's going to take people to kind of really say, once I get into this position, this is what we're going to be doing. I am fighting for this. But even more, that maybe we shouldn't just be looking to folks in political positions. There needs to be a lot more community and collectivism happening on the ground to actually change some of these structures, as opposed to waiting for Barack or waiting for Kamala to change these things. It's not really up to them. It's going to end up being up to us.
Can I say one thing that I would want everybody to look at in terms of the ways in which cultural racism plays out and in terms of representation? Want people to think about the commercials that they see. And one thing that I notice, and for those who don't know me, you know, those who do know me know that for the past couple of months, I have been doing like this study on cultural racism and how media and entertainment influences and skews our way of viewing representation.
Mm.
So when you look at commercials, and I urge you all to look at the frequency with which you see Black families portrayed in commercials just doing normal things, and the frequency with which you see multiracial families, Black mother, white father, Black father, white mother, played in commercials, and see the over representation of multiracial families and the underrepresentation of Black families, brown families, Asian American families, right? You don't see those families in commercials on TV. Now you see more gay families, you know, but even they're not represented to the level, to the percentage that they are in society. And yet we like mindlessly look at these things because it's just like the background noise in our lives. But those images and that narrative is imprinting on our brain. What does that do then in terms of seeing Asian American families and being able to imagine them with their children walking down the street, or Black families and imagine them on a Sunday outing without getting freaked out and needing to call the police? You know, what does it say about Black people, you know, being committed to each other in terms of relationship or being married? I mean, we do not look at these things as indoctrination messages or propaganda, right? We just look at it as another commercial. So when we think about representation and the messages that we're getting, we also have to look at those sources and kind of go back to see, okay, what is the message here and why?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because the next slide actually is about more entertainment. And now that I'm looking at this picture, I am not comparing Will Smith to Bill Cosby, y'all. I want to let y'all know. But I bring this up because I think that they both, however, there are some similarities. There are some similarities, I think, in how these two have been used as a tool for white supremacy and the representation conversation. Bill Cosby, as we know, if you have not seen the Cosby documentary, I think it was on Showtime. Very, very interesting. I do recommend people watch it and kind of come to their own conclusion. But just the way that that show was used. I remember having an argument in college with a superior who was like, oh, well, you know, we need more positive images of Black families on television, and Bill Cosby, you know, the reason why that show was so amazing is because of those images. And I was like, okay, it's like, that's great. But he was like, you know, Bill Cosby really, you know, tried to set us up for success. You know, he really tried to show us better. And there were so many times I had to kind of think like, well, was Bill Cosby's thing really about showing Black people, or was it showing like white people? Or maybe it's both. Like, and so some of this is about the gaze of white people and like what is acceptable, what a family unit is supposed to look like, what people are supposed to be doing in families. And look, I used to love the Cosby Show. I had no issue with it. But I think that some of the proximity to whiteness and what we think it's supposed to be and do, really, I remember kind of being like, I don't know how I feel about that. I did not have the same kind of understanding as I did back then as I do now. But when I think about representation, it's hard not to bring up Bill Cosby. It's hard not to bring up Will Smith. And so it's interesting now because unfortunately both of them have, well, Will Smith is currently going through something I think is not really that big of a deal, but for Bill Cosby, what he has done, and Will Smith, the discussion about how that impacts the representation. Now it's like, oh, well, our family used to watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I mean, and he's slapping people on stage. Like, he can't represent us. He can't be our like shining black prince. And so it's becoming, now it's still connected. The racism is starting, the backlash happens, and it becomes something else entirely. And so it rings hollow to the actual, I think, role of representation, what it actually does. It does really nothing. Did anybody else have any points of view on this situation, on these two?
So I remember when the Cosby Show first came on the air, and there were articles and opinion pieces written about how the Cosby Show was not a true representation of Black America. That Black people were not like Bill Cosby and what was it? What was his name? Cliff Huxtable and Claire Huxtable, that wasn't real, you know, as if there were no upper middle income Black families, right? But getting away from the distraction to the lesson, right? That as long as America does not feel threatened by the type of representation embodied by Black, Brown, Asian American, or other bodies, then that representation can be in the room. But once they move out of those narrow respectability defined by white America boxes, then all of a sudden they lose their status as, you know, favorite representatives, and they go straight back into this is how we view this racial group of people in general. Nobody called for what's his name, Roman Polanski, to give his Oscar back. You know, was he banned from the Oscars? I mean, we can take, you know, Harvey Weinstein. We can take case after case after case in how, even though these people may be punished, quote unquote, they don't speak for all of white America. They don't speak for anybody other than themselves. Whereas Will Smith, Bill Cosby, whomever speaks for a whole race of people. And what does that say about both representation, about who gets to define that, about who gets to keep those doors open or not? And what does it say about us that we then get caught up in the distraction of the Twitter conversations and whatever, and we're talking about, you know, the slap instead of having the larger, broader conversations about white supremacy and how representation plays into that.
Yes.
Anthony, you look like you were going to say something.
Yes, he was.
I was actually, go first, Michelle. I can hear.
Oh, I was going to go back to the Cosby Show. So I didn't know, Anthony, did you want to talk about Will Smith first? I want to go back to the Cosby Show.
Oh, no, go ahead. I wasn't going to do Cosby first, but my daughter wants to talk. So you
go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go back to, first of all, Julia and Adar agree with everything you all said. And I just kind of wanted to go back to talking about the Cosby Show, like kind of the other side of the coin, like Adar saying, oh, Black people don't live this way, right? And I think that so much of what we Black people have fought so hard for as far as representation in this country has been to prove our humanness to white people, right? Literally starting as soon as Black people were freed from slavery, we had you know, organizations, especially of Black women, trying to uphold, you know, the purity of Black women, that we are women too, and not to discount the work that those women did at that time. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think there's way too much emphasis on Black people trying to prove their Americanness or their worthiness or what have you. And I think that now we've gotten too caught up in what does success look like, right? Like we've bought in so much to this capitalistic two-parent household version of what white America thinks success looks like, and haven't spent a lot of time on what we as Black people think success is for us. And, and then when we talk about, I don't know if this is on a another slide that you had, Julia, when we talk about Jay-Z and Beyonce, right? Like, oh my God, I hate when people say that's Black excellence. Like, why? Because they have a lot of money? You know, like, it's just, there just feels like there's just way too much emphasis on success being what capitalism says success is, as opposed to what Black people, what do we intrinsically hold important? What are our values as Black people? What do we deem to be important? I don't feel like we have nearly enough conversations about that, as opposed to trying to prove that we are good enough for white people.
Well, when the beehive comes to get you, girl, I will not. I'm not going to. I do not know her. Y'all saw my face when she said it. I'm joking. But no, we definitely did talk about. I don't have a slide dedicated to them, but yes, that is definitely an excellent point. Anthony?
I wanted to say back to the documentary, what that made clear to me in Bill Cosby's documentary, what the documentary that they did about Bill Cosby is the other part that we need to watch. Bill Cosby strategically placed himself where he was. It wasn't that Bill Cosby was looking out for Black people. It's that Bill Cosby had positions in which he was like, oh, they see me as a family man. They see me as a fatherly figure. I'm gonna ride this train then. Oh, wait, they look at me to speak for Black folks. Well, I'll speak for Black folks then. That's what's bringing in the dollars. That's what's keeping me relevant, right? It was very much him as an individual choosing, and it shows different parts in his career where he was like, I'll try this. This is working. This isn't. I'll jump on this bandwagon, right? And so we so much are like, oh no, we're so invested in him because he invested in us. It was a strategy for him. Yes. Right. And so we also have to think about the Black folks who are making those decisions. We put all this investment behind them. And y'all know my pet peeve is Tiger Woods. I do not understand why still to this day, Black people are just so hard and support Tiger Woods that he has never even given a shout out. But folks go hard for Tiger Woods, right? But we do that because we're invested in the representation and what we want them to be and what our hopes are. And they're constantly showing us that, no, I'm not that person. I'm in this for myself. I'm doing this as an individual.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important. So for example, and I think this kind of actually shows where the representation thing, like conversation really is. Like, so we all know about the slap. We also know that after the Oscar parties, after the event, and Jay-Z held an event in Cali, I think in Cali, at some like restaurant or some space. But that space where a lot of Black and brown workers, actually work, they were striking because they were complaining about the pay, the working conditions that they're actually in. And a lot of people that I follow were talking about how Jay-Z, Beyonce, and others had, crossed the strike line. They had broken the line. Now, of course, people say, well, it's not even that big of a deal. What do we expect? And see, I think what you're talking about, Anthony, is like, we're in relationship, at least I think in a lot of folks' minds, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, they're ours. We are all Black people, they're part of our community. And so when Beyonce puts out an album, we're gonna go buy it and support it. If she does something for Black is King, we're like, yes, we're all Black people, we love it. But when it comes down to, hey, these people are striking, maybe have your party elsewhere. Black and brown people are being harmed. It would actually you could throw your support behind this. And not just money, but like, hey, we're not going to be having our business hour event here because their workers are not being treated the way they deserve to be treated. Like, those types of risks, those types of conversations is not enough just to like hear the music, but where's the other deeds to back that up? And so I think, like I said, the representation, they represent us, and yet they're not us. Like, I tell people the whole Will Smith, love him, still don't think he deserved that Oscar for that movie. But anyway, but he is a rich Black man. This slap, no matter what your thoughts on it are, he will more than likely be fine. Now, the people in my community, if they slap somebody, like that's something kind of smart at their job or in a space, I'm a lot more worried about the repercussions for them than I am for Will Smith. And so he represents us because he's Black. but he's not us. He is not me. He is not catching the bus to work. He is not, he's not doing that. And so I think that those things are also important to bring up. The different intersectional, like the class, those things are important to bring up. Our conversations do not always have that. Next slide, Dana. So we also discussed, well, part of the reason this really even came up is because a conversation around the lovely show Abbott Elementary, which ended yesterday. It was really good. A character on there, the principal, was upset. People were upset about the principal because she's kind of a lazy principal. And people were saying, educators, this is so awful. Why would they show her? Why would they have her on this show acting like this? We have principals that work hard. People are gonna think that Black principals aren't doing their jobs. And so I think this kind of goes back to what Adar was talking about. What does television or commercials or media teach us? But also, what are the limits there? Because I want representation. I want to see myself on television, but that also doesn't mean that every character needs to be perfect. Not every character has to be amazing. We are human beings, right? We have various sides, we have various beliefs. And so I think that the other part of the representation conversation is when we say representation, it's not just good, all the good stuff, especially when it comes to TV and media. We can play villains, we can be, villainous. And I think that is something I've noticed. People say, well, I want us on TV, but I want them to be perfect. Because once again, even in a fake scenario, we're worried about what white people are gonna say about characters that aren't real. White people are gonna start saying that Black women can't be principals. That's not gonna happen. I don't see that happening. Did anybody else have any thoughts about this or the other two movies that are on this lovely slide?
I would just say that for me, if representation is just about, again, the visual representation with those people being written with a whiteness sensibility, that to me is not representation. That is another form of blackface.
Yes.
And I recognize where that is the feel good thing, and that it is an easy thing for people to be able to say, but there we are. But again, there is something deeper going on there. What messages are we getting from those characters? Do we see ourselves in, as you're talking about, Julia, our full humanity?
Right.
Or do we see a white person's, who is not acculturated to a Black community, an Asian American community, a Native American community, who is not acculturated to those communities at all? Right. And so they are writing their vision of what, those people are like. Is that the type of representation? Is that representation, number one, or blackface, right? Yeah. And is that representation, quotes, is that going to be enough, number two? Yeah. So what are we looking for when we say representation?
Yeah, what is the plan? Anybody else, Anthony or Michelle?
I have a quote from the movie that you love so much and want to beat up on Queen and Slim. And the quote that they say in it is, why do Black people always feel the need to be excellent? Why can't we just be ourselves?
One of the better parts of the movie.
And I'm just going to put that right there and leave it there for you, Julia.
Michelle, you go ahead, because clearly.
Anthony. No, I was going to say about Abbott Elementary. So, I taught at a school where I did encounter, an administrator who was similar to the one on Abbott Elementary. And I think for some of us, that is our story. And I think that's okay. But once again, like we've already said, just too much energy focused on white gaze and this need for Black people to be perfect, as opposed to literally just telling our stories.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes those stories aren't going to be good.
Right. It's not all going to be flattering, and that's okay. That's life.
And can I say that the woman who's holding the sign, who plays the second grade teacher?
Oh, Quinta, yes.
She developed this show.
She
She's
did.
the showrunner for this.
Mhm.
And it shows.
It does.
And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about diversity.
Yep.
That right there.
It does. I wanted to put Abbott, I think in other parts of these stories is that, yes, Quinta Brunson, who is extremely talented, this is her story. This is like her own, like, pitch. And she puts so much of herself in her own story in the show. So like Abbott is named after a teacher, her favorite teacher from when she was younger, who inspired her to actually continue working. Even like the fellow characters, other characters in the show, they're people that I know. Like, they're people that my mom used to work with when I would go with her to school because my school got canceled. It's like, so I think that these things are so important, but we've got to remember that it's space for all of us. I think that Black Panther, that was a huge film when it came out. And it wasn't just like, okay, there's Black people in the movie, but even behind the scenes, there were Black people who had our interests and who wanted to make sure that what we saw, we connected with.
And it showed. And
yes.
It showed. Okay.
And it very intentional in how they did the actual work. Queen and Slim, something happened. Very beautiful film. Beautiful, really.
It was the same, all the things that you said too, though, right? Black writer, Black director, right?
Right, all of that.
Was it a writer? A Black writer?
Lena Waithe, right?
I heard that it was actually a white person who wrote it, but knew that they wouldn't be able to.
I heard that too.
Oh, really?
Wow.
That's what I heard.
Did you all feel, did the feel of it say to you, Black sensibilities, Black people behind the scenes, or did the feel of it for you, was it, white people behind the scenes?
I felt like, so this is what I will say. I think it was beautifully shot. And I loved that both the main characters were dark skinned and in love. We see so few dark skinned Black being in love or even having sex scenes. It's just very rare. That I loved. The ending was, to me, Black trauma porn. And I did not feel like that was written or delivered by a Black person. That was my own personal.
Yeah. And can I say that for Abbott Elementary, it is classified as a Black show.
Yeah.
So, this is the other thing, right? We in the whole diversity thing. And this is the problem with diversity to me, right? Other than all the other stuff I've mentioned. But the way in which it is still characterized as other.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we talk about a Friends or name a show with a majority white cast, nobody is talking about that as a white show.
Yeah.
We are talking about, what is it? Crazy Something Asians?
Oh, Crazy Rich Asians.
Okay, I'm sorry. I love that movie. But when we're talking about that, we're not talking about a movie. We're talking about, it's Asian American, and so I would want to see, in terms of diversity, we're talking about, name a show with a majority white cast.
Succession.
I want to see an article about Succession, a white show, blah, 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 blah. Name another majority show with a majority white cast.
You name a good point, Adar, because who gets to get the sexy glowing title of a diverse show, right? It has to be a white creator who then invited in
exactly
right
the outside. Because Abbott Elementary, you look at the cast right now, there's 2 white people there, right? So why would we not say that's diverse? And then all you could think is because it's 3 of the main cast that are Black, because it's majority Black, or because the main character is Black, right? And so who even gets to use the diversity stamp on it and get the
as opposed to the Black stamp.
Yeah.
And that is a problem, right? That is a huge problem. So Anthony, what I hear you talking about is the slide from diverse to just plain old Black, or just plain old, you know, the ways in which we put in the entertainment ghetto shows that are great shows, you know, like if people remember Friends, that was a complete ripoff from the show with the majority Black cast, Living Single. They never put any of the resources in Living Single that they did in Friends. They looked at Living Single and said, oh, this would really work with a white cast. And that is how Friends was born. And then way into seasons, the latter seasons, they put one Black person in it and said, oh, it shows the diversity.
And it was a big deal too.
Who gets to the question of diversity to Black or Latinx or Asian or whatever, the slide from that, and who makes that call? If it doesn't have white people in it, it's not going to be called diverse. It is going to be called Black. But if it has all white people in it, we're not going to call it white.
And even Jordan Peele's Get Out, diverse cast, right? That was a Black movie. And even when it was categorized, it was a comedy instead of a science fiction or horror film, right? And so even when it is a Black movie, it's not given the respect or put in the category where it's supposed to be at, right?
I do think that Jordan Peele meant for it to be a comedy, though. I do think that
as well as a horror movie.
And well, but I also think that this is just like a side thing. The Academy itself does not do very well, in my opinion, with respecting comedic performances, or horror. So I think that for him to even get the Oscar for Get Out, he had to kind of he had to categorize it in a certain way, because they do not try to give comedic performances or films or horror films any type of light. If it's not dramatic, if Homegirl is not on there crying, they're like, wow, that was cute.
But here's the thing about why they didn't recognize it as a horror movie, because it was a very specific type of horror movie. It was about the horror of living Black in America. And Jordan Peele was really clear about that.
He was.
Right? And they could not go there in terms of how they characterized the movie. Because the only thing that if they want to assign horror to something, it is going to be a movie about a period of enslavement.
Very true.
That's what it will be about. And then they won't even characterize that as horror, you know, but that will be something that they can talk about because that's a serious movie and blah, blah, blah.
They'll put a happy ending to it and it'll be a romantic comedy.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. A romantic comedy. Right. Or just a romance, like when America talks about Thomas Jefferson's repeated rape of child Sally Hemings. They talk about it as this romantic love story.
Yeah, not very romantic to me, but okay, folks. So for our next slide, what have we actually been talking about? A lot of the discussion points about how representation is actually used as a tool of white supremacy. One of the things that Adara always kind of talks about is being inculcated into this system, you know, being kind of forced to kind of live in this like white supremacist, like, you know, reality. And so everything that we do has got to almost be inspected, and there's a nuanced conversation about it. So that representation is not just about, it's because we accept Black people, we accept Asian people. It's really about money, and it's really about like, okay, well, are y'all gonna watch this? And that's great. But the actual movement of community is not enough. One of the biggest exports of America is Black culture. And so when I think about that, and I could imagine someone who comes to America and they're like, well, how come y'all aren't, you know, moving in this way? Why aren't you doing X, Y, Z? Because what they're seeing on television, what they're consuming in media, what they're seeing in the news, you know, especially if it's like, oh, Ketanji Brown Jackson or Kamala Harris, it's like all these like positive changes. And yet, if you go to certain communities, that change is not necessarily being felt, or the needle has not been moved. And so I think that it's really important to kind of put that into a perspective. And of course, the myth of Black excellence and American exceptionalism. I know that Anthony always talks about this. We had a lovely event on, what is it called? On Black respectability politics, either earlier this year or late last year.
Late last year.
Yeah. And that kind of fits into this as well. And so the Jay-Z's, the Beyoncé's, the Kamala Harris's, the Will Smiths, Black excellence is essentially you being a part of the upper echelon with white people, with whiteness. It's about your proximity to whiteness and money. And so that's something we have got to really, really think more deeply about. Did anybody want to add?
I'm sorry, if I can add one thing, and the proximity to whiteness, money, and the values. And whiteness values and practices.
Yes, absolutely. And then of course, internalized oppression. A lot of the conversations that we have around these topics of TV shows, internalized oppression is definitely present. We should be very careful, like I said, when we're talking about who represents us, why we think that they do represent us, why we think it's important. Like I always tell people, like I love like celebrity. I think it's so fun to watch people and to watch celebrities. But remembering that like I can't get too caught up because they're not me. They're not the people that I work with. They're not the people I'm in community with. Very different mentalities, very different understandings. And what does that do to me when I am engaging with it? What does it do to us as a people when we do engage? And then of course the impact of the white gaze. So I think a lot of this is about the white gaze. Michelle, you brought up a really awesome point that a lot of it's about us worrying about how are white people gonna look at us? How are white people gonna accept us? And that really struck me a lot of the time when it comes to the Will Smith situation. People saying, oh, well, if he wanted to say something, he could have taken him to the back. You know, they can't see us fighting. And it's kind of like, we fight. Like, we disagree. Like, we're not, you know, we don't agree with everything. I've seen people get slapped at cookouts, at family reunion cookouts. Y'all, like, come on. They can't see us fighting. We can't do that. And it's like, we see them fighting all the time, like all the time, honestly. And so it's not about comparison, but it's about the power, I think, of what that does. And so who was that? Toni Morrison talked about the, you know, what the real reason for racism is about keeping you off of your stuff. It keeps you looking over here when you should be looking over there. And so I think that those are really important things to remember. And one of the things that I didn't add here, but what I've gotten from this conversation is the difference between diversity and anti-racism.
Yes.
I do this work with BRJA and then my normal job. And DEI work is tiring and important work, right? Anti-racism and anti-oppression work is so important. But there is a difference. Like words do mean things. And I think that part of the representation conversation is that when you say diverse, people think that you are no longer racist. We have a mix of people here, so therefore there can't be racism afoot. And that is a very interesting trick bag to keep using, even though we know that makes absolutely no sense. So it's going to be important to kind of like talk more and think more deeply about that. Before we get into this last question, did anybody have any thoughts about these kind of discussion points?
I would just the thing about diversity or DEI or JEDI or IDEA or whatever the millions of acronyms by which it's known, and anti-racism, anti-oppression, and I remember when institutions were first talking about and trying to incorporate anti-racism, anti-oppression, or ARAO into their practices and policies, right? And there was not coded, but clear conversation about race, about power, you know, about sexism, about white supremacy, about all of that. And the power component was too much for a lot of institutions. Like, whoa, wait a minute, this is going to upset our power practices. Oh, heck to the no. And then, you know, DEI started coming up, you know, as, okay, we are going to do this. And we, instead of treating race and racism as the central fact of life that it is, we are going to treat it like one of a multi-layered oppression menu. And instead of talking about power, we're going to talk about welcoming and belonging. And so the water down of that and the symbolism of that, and I want to be clear, I'm not denigrating that work at all. I really am trying to talk about the difference between transaction and transformation.
Yes.
That there is transaction within institutions, right? That we talk about when we talk about DEI. And then there is this deep transformation in how institutions operate when we talk about ARAO. And then when we talk about liberation,
yes,
that goes even deeper, and nobody's ready for that conversation. So I won't even have it yet. But when we are talking about things and treating things, DEI, ARAO, as if it is just one thing and interchangeable words, then we are adding to the problem, adding to the problem. So I would urge, you know, everybody to really get clear and to begin to understand the difference, so that when you go back to your institutions, whether that even family is an institution, a form of institution, even in talking with your family, that you are able, we all should be able to really talk about things in a very real and clear way, instead of just picking up terms and throwing them out and concepts out that we really don't understand, because that just enables the way things already are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for adding that. As someone who works in DEI, we always talk about, like, words mean things and words are very powerful, and we have got to get the definitions correct. But I've definitely seen a lot more like, oh, well, you know, we have diversity. And it's like, I'm all for D, but like, the D is a very specific part of this acronym. There are other acronyms, there are other letters that we aren't focusing on. Because the E stands for equity. And equity, in my work, is like, when you start talking about power, which we try to talk a lot more about in my position, everybody's for diversity. The equity piece gets really, like, it's a little bit murky.
Right. And we cannot talk about equity without talking about reparations, without talking about repair. That is part of equity. So if we're not talking about that, we're not talking about equity. When we talk about inclusion, we're not talking about welcoming and belonging. If inclusion is not a conversation that includes power, how it's built, how it's wielded, how it's shared, then we're not talking about inclusion. So, and when we talk about diversity, all we're talking about is cheeks and seats. That is it. We're not talking about what goes on behind the scenes. We're not talking about who is pulling those strings. So again, our being clear about all of that, either we're clear about it and we can be agents of change, or what we're doing is being part of a system that already is. We're talking words, but we're not talking concepts or change.
And part of the action is being okay with not being with the in group, right? And so the in group may be like, oh, we all need to put our power behind Vice President Harris, but we don't need to investigate and talk about what her history was before. We just know that she's Black and we just have to, right? That's what the pitfall of representation is. And it's a piece of us that's lazy, that we don't want to actually do our research. We don't actually want to talk about, well, I want representation, but this is what I want and this is what I need, right? I don't just need another Supreme Court justice, and I'm not saying that that's Justice Ketanji, but I don't need another Clarence Thomas just to say that we have another Black person, right? I'd much rather choose a white person who says that I want to do like these things that align with my values and with my beliefs, instead of just saying we have another Black person so we can say we did it again, right? And so it takes work for us to be like, these are what I'm seeking, and for me to back that person first, instead of just say, blackface, okay, I'm with everybody else. Yep, let's go ahead, and then we'll figure out when the train crashes what to do then, and then we'll be like, oh, they wasn't who I thought they was gonna be. Never mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
While white people will say, what more do you want? We gave you representation and you're still not satisfied.
I think that that's actually a fear, that it's like, yeah, we want more, like, because this is not enough. Michelle, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna piggyback off of what Anthony was saying. I think it's more, I think another part of it, not so much just like that people don't want to do their research. I think a big part of it is that as Black people, we get emotionally connected to what we think a person stands for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people literally had to go through a mourning process with Bill Cosby, and so I think there's this whole thing of how we get emotionally connected to people. And, look at Obama. Like, I feel like people put things on him that he never said he was. This man,
Right.
in completely middle of the road, a moderate, like there's nothing about him ever in his history that says that he's nothing more than a moderate, right? But yeah, I think there's just this emotional piece that happens with us as Black people a lot of the times. And I don't know if this goes back to, for me personally, I know growing up, whenever a Black person, literally, I was born in 1978. So when a Black person got on the screen, literally my parents would get excited, right? So I'm not sure what that's about. I don't know if it just comes from a place of, feeling like this is something we haven't had or haven't had a lot of. I'm not sure, but the emotional part, I think, plays a big part for us.
Thanks, because that also makes us have to set fair expectations on what that person is also showing us too. So thank you for putting that part in there too.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Can I offer I want to clarify a point I made, because I want to be really, really clear. And Michelle, your comments made me think about this. That when I'm talking about white people, I'm using that as code for people who follow whiteness practices and those values. And that is not only white people. Right. That can be people of any race who has bought into, right, this whiteness paradigm of the United States. So I want to be clear about what I mean when I use that phrase, white people. I'm talking about people who have bought into whiteness, who are whiteness adjacent, regardless of race, who buy into those values and those principles and this whole racial paradigm of the United States. Just point of clarity.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think that all of you are excellent points, and definitely Michelle, the emotion, that is not something that we spent so much time talking about, but that emotion I think is definitely a driving force in how we discuss this. And you know what it is? I think that honestly, when you said it, I think that we get excited, the emotion, because we are afraid to really talk about the pain of what happens when this person does not live up to my expectations? What happens when we're not represented at all? Like, I think that we celebrate and we put so much energy into the Black excellence and the Beyoncés and Jay-Z's and the Baracks, because it's something that we have got to focus on, as opposed to the painful realization that what we have gone through, what we're put through on a daily basis is it feels very strong. It feels like you cannot get out of this. And so we look for the happy moments. We look for the happy points. Yeah. And so we protect that with our lives, because we have to have some joy with the pain, right? It's like, so a lot of this is about a covering of pain, and how harmful and hurtful it is to come from a people that were stolen, that were brought here against their will, that built this place up, that continues to just bring so much energy and greatness. And yet you have people telling you, I'm not going to hire you. I don't think that your culture is something. You didn't build this. That didn't happen. It is painful to be told that either verbally or in the shows that you watch, the stories you read, the history you read. That is painful because you know it's not true. And so having a Barack, having a Serena, having even your favorite golfer, Anthony, even having him is like a proof that like we were here and we did something, we added to it. Even if the system itself is awful, we were here and you can't deny that we were here. I think that that's part of the reason why representation is important, but it's not enough because it hasn't gotten us where we need to go. It hasn't gotten us where we need to be, where all of us are safe and healthy and happy. We're just kind of like looking for these happy points in our lives. And so I think that part of the action steps for that is being a lot more honest about what we need, what we deserve, what is going to help us to live. Because it can't just be this. Like, I love Black Panther too, but that is not enough. You know what I mean? So I know that we have a pretty small audience, so I didn't know if anybody wanted to add anything or had any thoughts before we wrap up and continue to leave. But, oh, great. Thank you. Am I pronouncing your name right, Shawnee?
Yes, Shawnee.
Thank you, Shawnee. Inspire, okay. Yep.
Oh, can you read the comment for the people who will watch on YouTube and won't get to see the text?
Yes, so Shawnee said, perfection. I love the discussion. Thank you so much. I agree with everything mentioned. I feel inspired and also a bit terrified because I am in a Jedi leadership position and must really reflect on how my role may be being manipulated as a tool of white supremacy, enabling the current practice and the current system. As someone who is also in like BEI work, I completely agree with you. I think it's so important for us to continue to sharpen our lens. It's really easy for people to think that once you get this stuff, that it's just like, okay, well, all the learning is done. I wish that were true, but it is not. And so using events like this and discussions with friends, as well as those who are in the work, to keep you kind of like in reality and grounded is so, so important. I think so you're able to kind of take that back and kind of be like, we need to rethink this, or this is not really what we want to do. I do that daily, so thank you. And I have the folks on the call, on this Zoom to kind of thank for that because y'all keep me grounded. Did anybody else have anything to say before we wrap up?
I would just, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
I was gonna say, I just hope that we get to a place, because also at this point, it's been what, 2 weeks. I'm tired of the Will Smith, Chris Rock and Jada conversation, but again, it's very much grounded in representation and making us look bad in all of this. I really hope we get to the space of, as everyone, not just Black folks with Black folks, but people who are not Black as humanizing us. And we see both ends of the spectrums. We see the like very tight and strict, this is how we're supposed to act. And then we just got to represent and be with each other no matter what. And so there's the part that doesn't allow us to be human and be ourselves. Absolutely. And that. And I think about people that are like, you should be watching the new Tyler Perry show because it's Tyler Perry and he's Black and he's doing all these things. I'm allowed to not like a show from a Black person. I don't have to enjoy it or have to support it because I'm Black. And then there's the other part of it where we have folks that are like, hey, this happened to this Black person who, you know, was imperfect, and we still forgive, we still support them. That might be a Will Smith for you, because also there are so few or so many places where we're still celebrating the first Black person or whatever person of color, right? Yep. Also give ourselves room for them to be humans in those positions that we have not occupied very long. Mm-hmm. So that is my last thing, for us to continue to hold place for us to be the full humans that we are.
Mm-hmm. And my last thing is that, number one, you know this is going to be on Red Table. So you know, we still got a minute with this. And also what everybody on this call can do is to really think about like what analysis you use.
Mhm.
Because it's not all the same. As Julia said, DEI is not the same as ARAO. When I ask people, what analysis do you use? Most people can't even answer that question because they think that it is all the same.
Right.
And there is really a historical thing behind all of this, and it is not the same analysis. So be clear, especially for people who are in these JEDI or DEI or whatever positions, be clear about what your analysis is so that you can bring that to whatever position you hold and then work within that structure. It will be your tool and your shield to protect you as you negotiate not only your work, but the politics of your work.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna, Dana, can you go to the May 13th slide? Because I wanted to make sure we got that in. So thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It will be on our YouTube channel, and we are going to be also hosting our May 13th of the month event, which is going to be the denial of innocence, a discussion on children in our community. And that's going to be on Friday, May 13th, 2022 from 6 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. I saw that in the chat. So yes, like Eastern Standard Time is when our events are. And if you all would go to the next slide, if you want to support us, make sure you, of course, if you want to donate, bemoreantiracist.com/donate. The link is also in the chat. Find us on Facebook, on Instagram.
.org. Sorry.
.org. And find us on Instagram, on the website, on our website, as well as Facebook. And so you can follow these conversations as well as our other events that we have coming up. So I want to thank everybody on the panel. Thank you for joining us. Oh, go ahead, Adar.
One more thing, and that if you all can continue to look on the website, because we have additional offerings coming out that is not just 13th of the month. We're planning a So You've Done DEI session where we will, especially for people who are in JEDI or DEI positions, this is something that you will want to come to, and not only just you, but your network will want to come there, so that even with you all participating in that, you are all building a group of people who can speak the same language and support each other in the work that you're doing in your institutions. So you'll be hearing more about that in the next couple of weeks on our website. So please stay tuned. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Adar, for that plug. And once again, thank you, and we'll hopefully see you next month.